One of the biggest changes in the U.S. in the last 20 years is the way we Americans define what is a family. No longer the two-parent, 2.1 child. The American family now consists of single parents, unmarried couples, adoptive parents, step-parents, gay parents, and a blending of all of the above. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Lynn Doyle. This is It's Your Call, where we are talking about some of the results of the 2010 census. If you have questions or comments yourself, you can go ahead and email me at lynn@lynndoyle.net. We have posted some questions on Facebook. I'm going to get to those in just a moment, but I do want to talk about this family and the concept of what a family is now. As a futurist and a sociologist, tell me what America's family today looks like as compared to 10, 20, 50 years ago.
Okay, one of the things obviously that's changed is that whole model of the two parents and the two children has, I guess, changed. It's still there, and in fact it's still the kind of family, if you think of an ideal family, the one that's reflected on situation comedies and those kind of programs, it's still in a sense the ideal. However, it's changing. We know that the number of children born, I guess what they used to call out of wedlock to single mothers, has increased dramatically. Almost 4 in 10 at this point are not to a married couple. So that's changed. But I think what's happened is, and this is where I think the family and the extended lifespan increase has changed this dramatically. As you have more generations living together, you will start to see, I think, the redefinition and the reaffirmation of the extended family, which seemed to have disappeared in the 1950s and 60s as we went to this kind of isolated nuclear family that would move around the country together and move away from the grandparents. Now, with the potential of 4 and 5 generations living healthily together, I think you're going to see a much more symbiotic and synergistic relationship between the generations.
We're actually seeing a return to the multi-generational family now, where kids have moved back in with their parents, or maybe grandma is still, back in the home with the family. That's actually a return to how life was early in America.
Yeah, and the question then is the government going to recognize that and develop policies to encourage it? There is, for example, a debate in many cities about adding ADUs, which are extra dwelling units in your house where you partition off with a separate entrance, where often a mother, grandmother can live. And there's resistance in a lot of cities for some good reasons, but at the same time, creating the zoning and other kind of policies that allow families to live together is going to enhance the ability to build stronger families. And so policy is going to have to follow, and that's another census, something where the census may lead us for policy to follow the changing American family.
Well, returning to what you were talking about in our first segment about the aging of America, and that the baby boomer population and those older than that are living longer, they obviously need a place to live, and if they're healthy, can't afford sometimes to live on their own, they don't need to be in a nursing home, so they need to return back to their adult children.
No, I think that's what you're going to see, and I think there is a hankering for this. I think we've missed, and it's something that I think we've missed in the United States over the last century, is this relationship between grandparents and children. I mean, we all know we have grandparents, but where are they? A lot of times they're isolated in Florida, North Carolina, wherever, and the children are still up north or in the Midwest. And I think what you see now is an understanding that there can be this interdependency between the different generations. You have the parents who are going out and they're working. The grandparents can play sort of a babysitter role. They can mentor the child when the parents aren't there. The parents could be helping the grandparents by having them live within the home. And I think that you're seeing this certainly reflected in the way that you see this increase in the multi-generational households.
Okay, on that note, we're going to go back to the telephone, where we are joined now by Cheryl Russell. She's the editorial director of New Strategist Publications, which is the publisher of reference tools, and she has some insight on these census results as well. Cheryl, it's good to have you with us.
Yes, happy to be on the show.
I was really interested when I was reading your pre-interview that you said one thing that came out of this census findings is that childhood is now being extended to perhaps the age 30. And I know you don't mean real childhood, but before people get out on their own and, and establish themselves. Tell me a little bit more about that, because I have a 28-year-old and I'm really fascinated by it.
Yeah, and I have a 23-year-old and I'm just getting involved in it. So But yes, childhood has been extended up until about the 30 to 34 age group. And one of the reasons for that is going to college. Men and women went to college instead of getting jobs and getting married. And that delayed adulthood for about 5 years. And about age 30, people have graduated from college, begun to work, and they're looking at buying homes. And that's when it used to be, until recently, that is when home ownership reached above 50%. And as home ownership goes above 50%, you also see voting rates rising above 50%. And that is really the culmination of becoming an adult, is taking part in community and civic activities.
So earlier in the show, we've been talking about the aging of America, and I think our minds typically go to people over 50 and above. But now you're actually throwing something new into the mix. It's the aging of the 30-year-olds. They don't actually take part in any of the adult responsibilities that perhaps some of us did at 18 or 20 until they're older now. What does that tell us about what the future is going to look like for America?
Well, I think we're in a big transition right now because at this point, because of the economy, adulthood is being delayed not just because of college, but also because people are unemployed and they are postponing marriage and postponing having children. So in the past few years, we've seen marriage rates declining. We have a record high age at first marriage for both men and women. And births have gone down because people are postponing starting a family because they can't afford it. So there's a lot of factors now that are pushing that age of adulthood into closer and closer to around age 30. Okay,
so we are going to be seeing a trend perhaps in the coming years where people are not having as many children as they've had in the past?
Yeah, the births are already down 7% from 2007. So there's been a 7% decline since the Great Recession in the number of births.
Okay. Cheryl Russell from New Strategist Publications, thank you very much for your insight.
Well, thank you for having me.
Sure thing.
I can add something here. There are also trends in another direction. Philadelphia especially has an organization called Gen Philly, which is people in their 20s and 30s who are asking now, what kind of city do I want to grow old in? And they're thinking about aging issues, and they're thinking of cross-generational issues. So there are also people in that age group who are thinking very seriously about the future in a way that I think people in their 20s and 30s did not think about the future, at least when I was that age.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up, because we're also seeing a trend moving away from the cities, are we not? People are not necessarily staying in these large cities as much as they are looking for the warmer climates of the South or the expansive areas of the West.
Yeah, can I just add, the suburbanites, the trend towards suburbanization is still increasing. I think it's still about 50% of the people living in a suburban kind of area. You do see the one group that is actually moving, some people moving back into the city are the empty nesters. But as we just heard, those empty nesters are disappearing because their children are moving back into their homes. I just wanted to make a comment on what she was talking about. I'm not so sure this extension of childhood is necessarily a good thing for society, and let me just tell you why. First of all, it's fine if people want to live together in a multi-generational household. That's fine. I think, as I mentioned, I think that's a good symbiotic, synergistic relationship. However, if they're doing this because they cannot get a job, they cannot get a foothold into the productive economy, they will not be forming their own households at any point. They will not be forming their own families. That's not a good long-term trend for society.
Now, I have to agree with you on that, and I don't like the idea of kids staying kids well into their 20s. I don't know about you guys, but at some point we got to cut them loose, okay? You tell me what you think. Lynn at LynnDoyle.net is how you reach me, or you can find us on Facebook. When we come back, we're going to take a look at more of the findings of the U.S. Census, including which ethnic groups are growing the fastest and what that means for your future, not only you individually, but us politically in this nation. That's coming up next.